Hello and welcome everybody. I'm very glad to be here with you today for this session titled Foundations First, Reimagining Physical Education Through Social Emotional Learning, Physical Literacy, and Inclusion. My name is Kyle Pushkarenko, and I'm thrilled to be speaking with physical educators and movement professionals who are passionate about supporting the whole child. Before we begin, I want to acknowledge the context of this session taking place in Taiwan and the diverse communities and cultures represented among us. If we were delivering this on Indigenous land in Canada, we would begin with a formal land acknowledgement to honor the lands and peoples where we work and live. Our session today will blend research, practice, and purpose, exploring how we can embed social-emotional learning directly into physical education and movement spaces in meaningful and inclusive ways. Let's begin by grounding ourselves in the objectives and intended outcomes for today. First, we'll build a shared understanding of what social-emotional learning, or SEL, is, particularly as defined by leading research and frameworks. Then we'll explore how SEL connects with physical literacy and inclusive practice, three pillars that, when integrated, can transform the learning environment. By the end of our time together, you'll be able to articulate what social-emotional learning looks like in practice, recognize how movement supports emotional development, and begin applying inclusive universal design strategies into your physical education settings. Whether you teach young children, teenagers, or adults, this work applies across the lifespan and across contexts. Here's a quick look at our time, how our time will be structured. We've organized the session into 6 main segments. We'll start with foundational definitions and frameworks before moving into the brain-body connection, or how emotions and movement interact on a neurological level. Then we'll explore physical literacy, what it is, and how it supports social-emotional learning. From there, we'll shift into inclusive practice and designing emotionally safe movement environments. Finally, we'll look at real-world examples across education sectors to bring these ideas to life. Breaks will kind of be built in, and we'll include time for discussion and reflection throughout. Now, I'm not going to be able to engage in the discussion and reflection. However, at the end of the presentation, there will be opportunities for questions and discussion to happen. Before we dive deeper, I'd like to set some community agreements for our time together. These aren't rules, but principles to guide our interaction. First, respect. Let's value the perspectives, identities, and experiences everyone brings to this space. Second is presence. I invite you to be fully here, not just in body, but also in spirit and attention. Third, curiosity. We're not expected to know everything. Questions are welcome, and exploration is encouraged. And finally, cultural responsiveness. Let's remain aware of the rich diversity in our group and remember that social emotional learning looks different across contexts. If you'd like, take a moment to add one of your own personal agreements to this list. I want to begin with this simple but powerful idea. We feel, therefore we move. This quote introduces the core of what we're exploring today, how our emotions and our physical actions are deeply intertwined. Whether we are running, stretching, playing, or even breathing intentionally, we are engaging in emotional expression and regulation through movement. The idea of embodied social emotional learning reminds us that emotions don't live only in our heads, they live in our bodies. Movement can be both a reflection of how we feel and a way to shift our emotional state. So as we continue today, keep this connection in mind. Movement is not separate from emotional learning. It's part of it. Social emotional learning is more than just a curriculum or a set of feel-good activities. It's a lifelong developmental process. This is the definition from Qpe Sel, the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning, and it frames social emotional learning as the intentional process by which all individuals, children, adults, and anyone develop essential human skills, things like forming identity, managing emotion, setting goals, practicing empathy, and building relationships. In a physical education context, these elements are often embedded organically. For instance, think about a relay race. It's not just about speed. It's about managing nerves, encouraging teammates, and bouncing back from mistakes. Social emotional learning gives us the language and lens to make that learning explicit and intentional. These 5 core competencies form the foundation of the Qpe Sel social emotional learning framework. Let's walk through them. Self-awareness is about the understanding of our own thoughts, feelings, and values. This shows up when students can name their emotions before a game or recognize when they might need a break. Self-management is regulating those emotions and behaviors, like breathing through frustration or setting a personal improvement goal. Social awareness means empathizing with others, respecting differences, and recognizing group dynamics. Relationship skills include things like communication, teamwork, and conflict resolution. These are all skills that physical education teaches daily through cooperative tasks. And finally, responsible decision-making refers to the ethical, safe, and respectful choices we make, both in and out of play. In every warm-up, every game, every reflection, we are practicing these competencies. While I had initially not intended to put this video into the presentation, I thought that it might be a good idea to help clarify any of the specifics that accompany the concept of social emotional learning. It should be noted that this video is specific to Qpe Sel, okay? And it was created by them. I hope you enjoy.
Think about the young people in your lives and all the different places where they're learning about themselves, how to relate to others, and work together on goals. How can we intentionally create learning experiences that will help all young people develop and maintain positive relationships, become lifelong learners, and contribute to a more caring, just world? Educators, researchers, community members, families, and the students themselves agree. What we need is social and emotional learning, or SEL. SEL is the process through which young people and adults acquire and apply the knowledge, skills, and attitudes that help us to understand ourselves, connect with others, achieve our goals, and support our communities. We all need opportunities to learn and engage in environments where we feel safe, valued, and a sense of belonging. So how does SEL help schools, families, and communities work together so that all young people have these kinds of learning experiences and achieve success in education, careers, and life? Hassel's framework identifies 5 areas of competence that together help us develop a healthy sense of who we are, manage stress, understand the views of others, and work together to create schools and communities where everyone can grow their strengths and interests. Self-awareness is about how we think about ourselves and who we are. It includes understanding our culture, our thoughts, feelings, and what we believe we're capable of, and understanding how these things can influence our behaviors and beliefs. Self-management is the ability to manage those emotions, thoughts, and actions in different situations so that we can achieve individual and collective goals. This includes coping with stress and anxiety, persevering through challenges, and taking action to create positive change. Social awareness is how we understand others, how we learn to take different perspectives and empathize, even with people who are different from us. It also includes understanding how the broader norms and systems around us influence how we develop and create a sense of belonging. Relationship skills are how we connect and engage effectively with others, and how we form lasting friendships and connections. This includes communicating clearly, solving problems together, managing conflict and disagreements, and standing up for ourselves and the rights of others. Lastly, responsible decision-making is how we put it all together to make caring and constructive choices. This includes thinking critically about consequences, analyzing the impact of our actions on ourselves and others, and identifying solutions that support our collective well-being. We continue to develop and practice SEL throughout our lives and can adapt and apply these competencies across different contexts and cultures. How we develop SEL is impacted by our environments, which is why we need to work together across classrooms, schools, families, and communities. In the classroom, students can be explicitly taught SEL skills and also can practice and apply SEL during core subjects, like discussing different perspectives in social studies and language arts, or collaboratively problem solving in science or math. SEL is most effective when supported by evidence-based programs and trusting relationships where students are treated as partners in their learning. Beyond the classroom, SEL can be intentionally promoted throughout the school experience, from the way they're greeted in the morning to how discipline practices are carried out, and how adults themselves develop and model positive relationships and the SEL competencies. Outside of school, families and caregivers provide the earliest and ongoing learning and interactions for their children. So it's important that schools listen to and authentically partner with families to help shape SEL priorities and strategies for supporting their children. Similarly, when schools partner with community organizations to align their efforts, SEL opportunities can be strengthened and students benefit even more. With SEL, we can help create schools and learning spaces where all young people feel connected, inspired, engaged, and ready to contribute to the world around them.
So why social emotional learning? Why now? Why is it so urgent? Well, we're seeing a surge in youth mental health concerns. Reports show significant increases in anxiety, depression, and social disconnection. The pandemic only intensified this, isolating young people from each other and from positive movement experiences. But social emotional learning is not just a response to crisis. It's also a proactive framework for building things like resilience. It helps people know who they are, navigate social complexity, and regulate their inner world. For physical educators, the opportunity is clear. We already create a dynamic, embodied environment. By layering social emotional learning into those spaces, we offer students tools for both physical and emotional wellness. Our emotional states don't live only in the mind. They're deeply tied to our physiology. Let's start with mirror neurons. These are the brain cells that fire not just when we perform an action, but when we observe someone else performing it. They help us read emotions and synchronize with others. That's why synchronized movement like clapping games or dance, these can enhance social bonding. Then there's the vagus nerve. which connects our brain to our heart, lungs, and digestive system. When we feel safe, this nerve helps calm our system. When we move, especially rhythmically, we can engage the parasympathetic nervous system and promote this idea of calm. In physical education, movement isn't just physical. It helps regulate emotions and deepen empathy. Our students literally feel better when they move, and we can shape that experience intentionally. Bessel van der Kolk famously said, "The body keeps the score." Trauma, stress, and fear don't just sit in our minds. They live in our nervous system. For students impacted by trauma, or simply stated by stress, movement can either dysregulate or regulate their state. That's where safety becomes key. So before students can self-regulate, they need co-regulation, a calming presence from a trusted adult, predictable routines, and emotionally safe spaces. Physical education can offer that. When we create movement environments that are inclusive, low pressure, and relational. Here, it's not about fixing behavior. It's about creating conditions where regulation can grow. So social emotional learning isn't just a nice to have. It's a foundational to learning a long-term and long-term success. Studies show that students with strong social emotional learning skills do better academically. They have fewer behavioral challenges and are more likely to thrive socially and emotionally as adults. But effective social emotional learning is not a one-size-fits-all idea. It has to be culturally responsive, attuned to the lived realities, backgrounds, and values of our students. What feels safe or respectful in one culture may feel different in another. So teaching social emotional learning also means supporting healthy identity development, helping students see themselves reflected in the activities we offer and the values that we uphold. So let's talk about emotions and learning. Neuroscience tells us that emotion is not a side effect of learning. It is central to it. Students can't focus or retain information if they are emotionally overwhelmed or dysregulated. One simple tool that we can use is this idea of the zones of regulation, or categorizing our states as calm, that being in green, anxious, that being yellow, upset, being red, or shut down, blue. Just naming where we are can begin to shift it. And another thing is building an emotional vocabulary, like learning the difference between concepts like annoyed, frustrated, and angry. These are powerful, in social emotional practice. The more social emotional learning practice, I should say, the more words students have, the more precisely they can manage their emotions. Physical education can support this with short emotional check-ins, mood-based warm-ups, and reflective cool-downs. While we often focus on social emotional learning for students, we can't forget that we are also on a social emotional journey. As educators, we're constantly modeling social emotional learning, whether we mean to or not. Students notice how we react to things like frustration, how we give feedback, and how we repair relationships. Practicing social emotional learning ourselves, naming our emotions, using positive language, and staying calm, all create a climate for students to grow in. And this is lifelong work. We don't graduate from social emotional learning. We refine it with every classroom moment, every relationship, and every challenge that we face. So let's quickly just bust a few myths here. First, social emotional learning is not soft. It's not fluff. It's about avoiding conflict or making everyone feel good all the time. Sorry, I should rephrase that. It's not about avoiding conflict or making everyone feel good all the time. In fact, social emotional learning helps students face challenges, navigate hard emotions, and grow resilience. It's rigorous, meaningful work. Second, social emotional learning is not just for little kids. Teens and adults need social emotional learning just as much, if not more. We may use different tools or language, but the core skills, things like self-awareness, empathy, and reflection, they do not expire in childhood. Finally, social emotional learning isn't just one more thing. It's the thing that makes all other things work. Academic success, healthy relationships, and safe classrooms all depend on social emotional learning. I want to pause here and just invite a quick reflection. Think about your current practice, whether you're teaching physical education, coaching, or supporting learners in another way. Which of the 5 social emotional learning competencies do you already emphasize? Maybe it's relationship skills because you focus on team building, or self-management because your activities challenge students to regulate their energy. Just take a moment to jot down your thoughts or turn to someone near you and share. Okay? I'll pause for a few seconds here, but it is worth, some introspection, to determine, what you are already doing so that you can move on to what you might need to do in the future. So now that we've explored the what and the why of social emotional learning, let's begin shifting towards the how. Qpe recommends that strong social emotional learning programming follows the SAFE model, an acronym that stands for sequenced, or skills that should be introduced progressively. This is kind of the idea of thinking of scaffolding. Before students can reflect on how their emotions affect others, they need to first recognize their own feelings. The A is active. Social and emotional learning is learned by doing, not listening. That means games, role play, and group tasks all have a role in fostering those social emotional connections. Focused is the F. Here we are carving out intentional time for social emotional learning to take place, not just squeezing it into transitions. And finally, the E stands for explicit. We must name the skill being learned. Don't assume students will automatically connect movement to emotional regulation unless we draw that line clearly. In physical education, we're already doing many of these things. We just need to name and frame them a little bit more intentionally. So let's think about the climate that we're creating, not just the content that we're delivering. Social emotional learning thrives in emotionally safe environments. That means greeting students by name, acknowledging their presence, maintaining predictable routines so that students know what to expect. This lowers anxiety. Embedding reflection moments, even a 1-minute check-in, can build that sense of awareness we're looking for. And finally, creating physical or symbolic calm zones. These are spaces where students can pause or opt out without shame. These strategies are not just for students with high emotional needs. They help all students feel seen, supported, and safe to take risks. And the physical education space offers a rich opportunity to model this warmth, even in high energy activities. So let's summarize where we've come so far. Social emotional learning is not a buzzword. It's a research-backed framework grounded in decades of developmental, psychological, and educational science. Its 5 core competencies: self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and decision-making. These are directly supported in physical activity settings. We've also seen how brain-body connection sort of reinforces the importance of movement in emotional regulation and relational development. Finally, we explored how the learning environment, the emotional climate that we create, shapes whether social emotional learning can flourish. Next, we'll explore this concept and how it connects with physical literacy, and how movement isn't just a context for social emotional learning, but a language through which we express and develop it. Most understandings of and approaches to physical literacy share commonalities grounded in what we call a Whiteheadian perspective. Margaret Whitehead, the maven of physical literacy, or the modern day understanding of physical literacy, defined it as the motivation, confidence, physical competence, knowledge, and understanding to value and take responsibility for engagement in physical activities for life. Further, physical literacy is a defining set of capabilities and dispositions that enable active participation in movement cultures across an individual's lifespan. These occur through embodied interactions with our outside worlds. Physical literacy is thus deemed essential to all individuals' overall development and quality of life. Additionally, physical literacy has some underlying characteristics that are essential to our discussion of social emotional learning. First, physical literacy in its development is unique to all individuals. So like a piece of music and its collection of notes and tempos arranged in a particular pattern, physical literacy development occurs according to the individual's collection of experiences that are specific to them. As such, it is not a one-size-fits-all notion. Second, physical literacy is impacted by those around us. Not only are opportunities afforded to us by individuals such as parents, coaches, and peers, but their support provides us with the encouragement to initiate and or maintain participation in a wide variety of activities. Third, physical literacy occurs everywhere. So physical literacy is not restricted to physical activity contexts such as the gymnasium. Its development occurs at home, within the community, and wherever we are afforded the opportunity to move. Finally, physical literacy development is lifelong. It first develops as we are young and continues to develop while we age, or as we age. Saying this, it does not stop, but rather shifts depending on our life circumstances. This is another video, and one that I'm proud to say I helped conceptualize, that I thought I might add to your understanding of the concept of physical literacy. While I know that most may have already been exposed to this concept, this video takes all of those characteristics mentioned in the previous slide and somewhat places them into context that might be a little bit different, thus providing a fresh take on the idea of physical literacy. I hope you enjoy.
We are born with the gift of movement. but we must nurture our gift and care for it, and in return, it cares for us.
Every drop of water has a story. This one tells a story of how we move. Physical literacy is our movement. It's the unique relationship we have with our body. Physical literacy is a lifelong journey. It starts from the day we are born and is ever-changing as we navigate life. Physical literacy is not just sport, like skating on a rink or scoring points for your team. It is the development of confidence, knowledge, and competence as you move through life. It's in everything we do. From climbing our personal ladders of achievement, picking up after one another, or bagging our own groceries.
Physical literacy is more holistic than just the physical aspects of a person. It connects the mind, body, spirit, and physical aspects of being. And like water, it continually flows and contributes to the balance in life and overall wellness.
There are no limitations to physical literacy. It is defined by you. What's your movement story?
So physical literacy, much like social emotional learning, is multidimensional. It spans 4 major domains: the affective domain, which includes things like motivation and confidence, without which movement doesn't happen; the physical domain, okay, which includes things like skills, balance, agility, coordination, and strength; the cognitive domain, which involves things like understanding rules, tactics, and the role of physical activity in maintaining a healthy lifestyle; and finally, the social domain, which includes things like collaboration, empathy, and respectful participation. Okay. When we understand physical literacy this way, we see just how much overlap it has with social emotional learning. The work we do to build movement capacity is also work that builds the whole person. So what happens when we place social emotional learning and physical literacy side by side? We find a deep, natural intersection. Both are about lifelong well-being, not just short-term performance. Both emphasize motivation, connection, and competence, whether emotional or physical. And both are contextual and relational. They grow through meaningful experience, not just instruction. When we teach physical literacy or teach physical education, we are already supporting both physical literacy and social emotional learning. We just need to make that link more intentional. And when we teach social emotional learning through things like movement, we give students embodied, memorable experiences they can carry with them beyond the gymnasium. This is where it all comes together. So movement is not just a container for social emotional learning, it's a pathway to it. When we move, especially things like rhythmic movement, cooperative movement, or expressive movement, we activate the same emotional circuits that manage stress, foster connection, and support learning. Think of the games where students must mirror another's movements, or relay races that require things like trust and timing. These aren't just motor experiences, they're emotional ones. They build perseverance. They teach empathy. They stretch our comfort zones and teach us how to recover, adapt, and grow. This is embodied social emotional learning, and physical education is one of the best places to teach it. Let's take a closer look at the kinds of movement environments that support social emotional learning. Games, especially those with cooperation or team roles, these naturally prompt students to negotiate, adapt, and communicate. Outdoor play adds another layer. Things like exposure to fresh air, less structured spaces, and sensory variation that supports nervous system regulation. Group movement, whether they're in the form of dance, yoga, sport, or group obstacle courses, they all provide a strong foundation for social bonding. These contexts are not just opportunities to be active. They are rich, built-in settings where social emotional learning takes place, and the skills associated with social emotional learning can flourish. And if we design them intentionally, and reflect on them afterwards, affordances for social emotional learning are that much greater. As educators, we are not just instructors. We are co-regulators and emotional leaders in the space. Our tone, our language, our reactions, they all shape the emotional climate. When we model naming our own feelings, things like "I'm feeling energized today" or "that game was tough for me too," we normalize emotion as a part of learning. When we praise effort instead of outcome, we build growth mindset. And when we treat failure as feedback, "Great try, what could you change the next time?" we teach resilience. You don't need a special social emotional learning curriculum to do this. Just be intentional in your words, your reactions, and the spaces you hold. Here's a helpful comparison to illustrate the shift we're exploring. Traditional physical education often focuses on things like drills, competition, and outcomes. Things like how fast you ran, how far you threw, or who won. Social emotional learning informed physical education doesn't discard skill building, but it layers it in emotion, reflection, and relationship. It values growth over comparison, inclusion over exclusion, and collaboration over isolation. For example, in a social emotional learning physical education, we might pause after a game to ask what emotions came up for you during that activity, or who helped support a teammate today. This small shift from performing for results to engaging through relationships makes a big difference in how students experience movement. Before we move into our next foundational concept of inclusion, let's just take a moment to connect social emotional learning and movement to your own practice. Think of an activity you already use, maybe a warm-up game, a cooperative relay, or a team sport, and ask yourself, what social emotional learning competency is naturally embedded there? Does it build relationship skills through teamwork, self-awareness through solo performance, or decision-making in gameplay? Jot that down or turn to a partner and share. When we recognize what's already working, we're better equipped to refine it and make it more intentional. Please take a moment to do this. Now let's turn to the third pillar in this presentation, that being inclusion. At its heart, inclusion is about belonging, or ensuring that every student can participate fully, meaningfully, and safely. We often talk about physical barriers, things like stairs and equipment, but inclusion also means addressing emotional and social barriers, things like fear of embarrassment, lack of representation, or inflexible expectations. We align with the social model of disability here, which says the problem isn't the person, it's the environment. If a child can't access a game, we ask, what can we change in the game, not what can we change in the child? As such, when we design movement spaces with belonging in mind, we meet both physical and emotional needs, and that is the foundation for learning. Before we move on too quickly, it's necessary to create some clarification as to this idea of inclusion that we are attempting to foster. This is where I like to cue the sandbox analogy. When we speak about inclusion, we need to be cautious about how we approach it, as inclusion possesses a negative connotation. Inclusion is about establishing a single context in which we all can flourish. The negative connotation exists when inclusion is made out to be a context in which people are brought into it. Here it's implied that there is a context that is ideal, one which adaptation can service the needs of more than just those who are part of that context. This is where the sandbox analogy comes into play. Successful inclusion is not about attempting to bring individuals into our sandbox, but to create a larger sandbox for everybody to play. Inclusion and emotional safety also go hand in hand. Students cannot access their learning brain if they do not feel safe. That safety isn't just physical, it's emotional. It means students can take risks, ask questions, express needs, and know that they will not be judged or excluded. For many students, especially those with trauma histories, neurodivergent identities, or marginalized experiences, movement can be a stressor. That's where the co-regulation comes in. When we model calm presence, speak gently, and offer choice, we support their nervous system. This is how we create trauma-informed movement environments, through attunement, flexibility, and care. Despite our best intentions, however, many of our practices unintentionally exclude. Some examples are things like ableism, or when we design activities that assume all students can run, jump, or respond in a specific way. Okay. Another one is cultural bias, or using games, music, or norms that center only on one group's traditions. Language or gender assumptions, okay, saying boys against girls, are not offering spaces for things like non-binary students. And finally, structural issues, things like limited staff support, inaccessible spaces, or inflexible schedules. We do not intend to eliminate individuals. However, sometimes that elimination occurs by the wayside. Okay? Our job is not to eliminate every barrier at once, but to recognize them, question them, and then adapt. So inclusion is an ongoing practice of reflection and redesign. One of the most powerful tools for inclusion is Universal Design for Learning, or UDL. UDL encourages us to plan proactively, not for the average student, but for the range of learners in the room. With UDL, there are three core principles. First is representation. This is providing visuals, demonstrations, or multilingual supports, okay, ways that will convey or communicate intention so that most learners or all learners can understand. Second is action and expression. This lets students move in different ways. It allows individuals to choose roles, okay, and to respond verbally, non-verbally, or creatively. Okay? In other words, it's multiple ways to respond and perform to the instruction that's been given. And third is engagement. This is connecting movement tasks to students' lives and interests. Okay? Allowing students to find meaning and offering them meaningful choices, those that students dictate, not the teacher. Designing with UDL isn't extra work. It's just smart planning that benefits everyone. Let's bring UDL to life with a real physical education example. For representation, we might demonstrate a new skill and show a visual diagram. Okay? We might let a student model the movement as opposed to just verbal instruction. For action and expression, think about offering choices. Maybe students can pass a ball using feet, hands, or a striking implement. Or maybe they take on different roles, things like a scorekeeper, referee, or a timer. Okay? One caveat to this is that we also have to allow them that idea of voice. And this is where, okay, the idea of engagement comes in, okay, where we allow individuals, okay, to provide a preference, okay, in how they want to participate. But for engagement, we might also let students vote on things like warm-up games or designing a challenge using the equipment of their choice. This flexibility isn't lowering standards. It's just raising access and strengthening things like autonomy, confidence, and joy. In short, language shapes perception. It can either empower it or limit it. Okay? Inclusive language starts with a strength-based lens. Instead of saying nonverbal student, say a student who communicates nonverbally. Instead of at risk, say at promise. Normalize this idea of diversity. Say things like everybody moves differently, and that's a strength in this group. Ask open-ended, empowering questions. Things like, what would help you participate in this game? Or, do you want to show me a different way? It isn't about being politically correct. It's about building trust, maintaining dignity, and affording agency on behalf of the student. To bring this all together, okay, and to somewhat close this part one, okay, information session on social emotional learning, okay, we've explored this idea of social emotional learning as a developmental framework. Physical literacy as a lifelong journey toward movement and movement confidence, and inclusion as the practice of ensuring that every learner belongs. So to kind of, again, bring this all together, these are not separate silos. They are deeply interconnected. And when we design for one, we support the others. Physical education is not just about fitness. It's a space for healing, connection, and growth. In our next session, we'll dive into some practical strategies, lesson design, reflection tools, and activity adaptations to activate these foundations in real-world practice. Thank you for coming this far on the journey. I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.